Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, back today with another Omnibus review, and today I'm taking a look at the recently released Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4. This is something I'm really happy to have, really excited about, because of course this means we've now got the entirety of Ultimate Spider-Man collected in Omnibus format, which is a huge collecting goal achieved for me personally, because for quite a while this has been one of my all-time favourite series. It's something I hold in really, really high regard. So to say I've now got the entirety of it and I can read through it from beginning to end in these beautiful oversized volumes is just a really cool thing, to be honest, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to talk about this book today, obviously dive in and go a little bit through some of the content, summarise what goes on during this particular volume. As I did with the other books in Ultimate Spider-Man, I've already covered all those already, so feel free to check out my other reviews if you're interested. But here and now, obviously, Volume 4, we'll take a look at this one. There will be some spoilers involved, so I will just kind of let you know now ahead of time, give you fair warning of that fact, because this is a book that, as I say, really, really like it. So I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about it in some detail here. With this volume, we're moving on to the post-Mark Bagley era of Ultimate Spider-Man. He had been the one and only artist on the book, with the exception of a couple of annuals, or maybe just one of the annuals, actually, from the very beginning, you know, and famously he had that record with Brian Michael Bendis for longest writer-artist collaboration. They famously beat the record previously set by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on Fantastic Four back in the Silver Age. But yeah, so if we take a look at this book, so we've seen the artwork on the cover, a wraparound image by David LaFuente, who is one of the two main artists whose work we're going to see in here, along with Stuart Immonen. This is pretty cool, I quite like this. Nice bit of wraparound image, as I say. Good bit of stuff on the cover. And as we dive in the book, one final time, just to let you know there will be a few spoilers to follow. So, first thing we see here then is the creator credits page. So, Brian Michael Bendis, still the main writer. The fact that he wrote all this from beginning to end really, really boosted the series. It was a huge benefit, I think, to have one person writing it in terms of really helping it to feel like one long, consistent story. Which it really does, you know, that's what Ultimate Spider-Man really is, and that's kind of why I love it so much, because when you read it from beginning to end, it doesn't feel like a long series, which, although it is, it feels more like one long specific story, you know, because all the characters, you know, being written by Bendis from beginning to end, the whole kind of, all their character arcs, their development, everything else that they all go through, it just has quite a natural feel to it, and I don't think that would have been the case if you'd had several other writers all getting involved at different points throughout this, as happens with most long series. Yeah, so big benefit. Bendis did a great job on this, and yeah, very cool that you can read it and it has that long story feel to it. An introduction here then by Ralph Macchio, pretty cool to read through, and then a little summary over here on the left, just before you dive into the first issue of the book, that summarises kind of what's gone on in the series up to this point. And then we go in with Ultimate Spider-Man issue 112 and the beginning of a new Green Goblin story arc. So picking up here, obviously directly after where Volume 3 left off, and we're now seeing the artwork of Stuart Immonen, who's taken over from Mark Bagley at this point of view. And given how long Bagley drew this book for, and that, you know, in terms of omnibuses, you've got 3 full volumes of Bagley artwork before you now get to here and somebody else taking over. It's kind of hard not for there to have been some inevitable comparisons drawn between whoever was going to be Bagley's successor on the series, because Bagley had given it such a distinct look. He really had. It's really great, the whole Bagley era, and it's my kind of favourite part of the series. But that's not to take away from the work of Immonen and LaFuente, who I think both did a really good job on this. Bagley's style is quite a cartoony style, in my opinion, and it gave us, you know, a distinctive look, as I said, but I think that Immonen and LaFuente both did a generally good job of somewhat imitating that and giving it a sense of visual continuity. Yes, you can tell it's somebody else drawing the book, but it doesn't look so drastically different, in my opinion, that it's a jarring change when you finally move into this post-Bagley era. I didn't have any problems with it. You know, it didn't affect my enjoyment of the book in any sense. You know, quite the opposite. In fact, I thought it was quite cool to see a different art style coming onto the book after such a long time, even being a big fan of the Bagley era of this series as I am. And as I say, you know, Bendis still writing the whole thing, so really doesn't matter too much as you move into this 4th volume. It still definitely feels like Ultimate Spider-Man. Nothing feels like it's changed too drastically, and all the best stuff is still there in the story. So no complaints really. I really like all this, and I think that, as I say, you know, Immonen did a really good job. Then we're moving into the first arc of the book then, where we've got, it's a Green Goblin story arc, where previously Norman Osborn, everybody knows he's the Green Goblin at this point in time. He's been locked up in this kind of supervillain prison called the Triskelion, I think, or Triskelion, can't remember like how you're supposed to say that. But anyway, it's where the Ultimates, who are the ultimate version of the Avengers, kind of send all the supervillains that they apprehend and capture. Green Goblin, I've said it before in the reviews of the previous volumes, but I kind of really like the look of Green Goblin in Ultimate Spider-Man, this monstrous look where he physically transforms into an almost Hulk-like creature, and he's got these flaming eyes and like fiery breath he can use. It's, yeah, just a truly demented version of the Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is a real psychopath in Ultimate Spider-Man, and that's kind of saying something because he's not exactly the sanest guy in the normal 616 universe. But yeah, it's a real warped dynamic that exists between Norman and Spidey in here, you know, because Norman knows that Peter is Spider-Man. Not only that, he kind of thinks that he owns Peter because he is aware that it was an Oscorp spider that bit him in the first place to give him his powers. Here, this is cool, man. There's a lot of good stuff. I am at risk of rambling about random stuff on random pages here. That's just how much I love this series. But yeah, there ends up being a fight here between Norman as the Green Goblin and his son Harry Osborn, who is, you know, the ultimate hobgoblin as well at this point of time. And it seems like Norman kills Harry here in a fight. Yeah, that's dramatic stuff. Here is a scene where, if I remember rightly, this is Liz Allen discovering that she is a mutant. Now, Liz Allen is one of Peter's schoolmates. She goes to the same high school he does with Mary Jane and others. She's been a mutant phobe in the series, really passionately anti-mutant, and then it turns out that she is a mutant. Magneto comes calling and is kind of giving her the spiel about, you know, how she can come and join him, mutants are superior and all that. Yeah, just a little kind of subplot that's going on, and then naturally the X-Men show up as well and have the kind of opposite conversation. Yeah, the high school drama, you know, all these characters that Peter goes to school with, the other students, the teachers. One thing that Bendis did so well, you know, it just has to be praised, is how well everybody was characterized. Even relatively minor characters feel like real people the vast majority of the time. And it just makes this such a fun thing to read through. As I say, it has a quote-unquote realistic feel to it. It's just, yeah, just something I can't really recommend enough. If you are a Spider-Man fan and you've never read through Ultimate Spider-Man, then definitely check it out, you know. And chances are, if you're watching this, though, at all, you're probably at least interested in Ultimate Spider-Man if you haven't read it already. In which case, yeah, it's as good as everybody says it is. You know, I feel like the general consensus is that Ultimate Spider-Man is the best thing about the Ultimate Universe. It really is. There's not even a close second, to be honest. Ultimate X-Men is kind of garbage. Ultimate Fantastic Four and the Ultimates are okay, but not that special, really. But Ultimate Spider-Man is just about several levels above all that stuff. You know, it's on a level of its own. Here we're seeing, you know, just kind of flicking through these pages, but more symbiote stuff. The Venom symbiote coming back, the Ultimates, including Captain America, getting involved. Yeah, and this isn't even halfway through the book when we start to get to a couple of really big developments in the series, which kind of starts here, Ultimate Spider-Man 127, with Gwen Stacy, who has come back. So Gwen had been killed off, you know, as Gwen Stacy's tend to be. How many times have you got to read Gwen Stacy dying in different Spider-Man series? But she comes back here, and she comes back in really weird circumstances. So to cover stuff that happened back in Volume 2, I think, like kind of quite a long time before this in the series, Gwen was killed off by Carnage. And it was really sad, and it really affected Peter and Aunt May, who had been looking after her as a kind of foster parent, and Mary Jane, who was friends with her, and, you know, several other people who all knew Gwen well. It was obviously a sad event. And then, mysteriously, she comes back, and she's not exactly normal, I guess you could say. Here's a classic page where she shows up. She's in Peter's room. He's come home to just find her here. She's talking to him like nothing's happened, other than she can't quite remember like where she is. But she's got this kind of horrific symbiote face. So Peter's understandably kind of like, what's going on? Aunt May is even more shocked because this whole idea of people coming back from the dead is understandably a bit weird. But basically, it kind of turns out that, and the science of this isn't something you really need to worry about too much, but somehow by absorbing and killing her originally, the Carnage symbiote has sort of reconstructed a genetic version of her that it sort of spit out. So they do these tests on her at the Triskelion, the SHIELD headquarters, and they just conclude that it's weird, but she's effectively a normal human girl again. So they just sort of let her back out, and she joins Peter and goes back to live with him and his Aunt May again. And yeah, in any other series, that would be absolute garbage as a plot point. But somehow in Ultimate Spider-Man, it really isn't. And even if the way I describe it doesn't really do it justice, just trust me when I say that it works and it's cool. And it's just nice to have Gwen back again, to be honest, because she was a well-written character. And the fact that she comes back is all good in my book. Yeah, so here we're seeing scenes where Aunt May is arrested because she at this point knows that Peter is Spidey. And I think it's SHIELD who've sort of arrested her to find out what she knows about Spider-Man because the authorities are narrowing in on him. But right about the time that happens, this happens. And this, as you may well know, is the Ultimatum event. The big catastrophic event that came and was originally intended to spell the end of the Ultimate Universe as a whole. This is a massive, destructive event in every sense of the word. Literally what happens is, to keep it fairly brief, because obviously this is not an Ultimatum review, but Ultimate Spider-Man and everything else got inevitably caught up in it. I mean, look at what's going on here. How could Spider-Man not get involved somehow? The entirety of New York is just wrecked by a massive ray of tsunamis that just crash into it and just destroy the city. There's a lot you can say about Ultimatum, and I don't really want to get into it, but needless to say, it's kind of a vindictively violent and cruel event that killed off so many characters in, frankly, really brutal ways that didn't seem necessary. It seemed almost spiteful the way it was written. But Spider-Man's involvement in it is actually really good. It's something that Bendis really made the best of a bad situation by having Spider-Man show off exactly why he's a hero. This here, which I was hoping to find as I flicked through the book, is literally one of my favourite ever Spider-Man panels, pages, double page spreads, whatever. J. Jonah Jameson here, in what's left of the Daily Bugle, which is submerged, looks out the window, and bear in mind Jameson had been anti-Spider-Man up until now pretty much, looks out and sees Spidey diving in what is clearly a hopeless situation, but even in that dire circumstances, he's doing what he can to save every person possible. And that is Spider-Man. That is what Spidey is. No matter the odds, with great power comes that great responsibility. And he has that responsibility to save and help every single person he can, no matter how pointless or hopeless it might seem. It's really the epitome of what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man, and that's a great scene. And the fact that it comes in the middle of one of the worst ever events is quite a juxtaposition. But yeah, this is... Yeah, it's just chaotic, it's crazy. The city is in ruins, more or less. But Spidey's fighting on. He ends up meeting the Hulk here. Hulk in the Ultimate Universe, not the best version of the character, but it's pretty cool. Then he also gets caught up with Doctor Strange. There'd already been a story prior to this with Doctor Strange in Ultimate Spider-Man, so he does kind of know him a little bit already. But I think in this series, in Ultimatum, in this story, I should say, as is the case with so many others, Doctor Strange ended up getting killed. And seemingly Spider-Man dies as well here in this quote-unquote final issue, issue 133, which is a series, an issue, with no dialogue. As you flick through here, it's a story told entirely through just the artwork alone, which is cool. I quite like when you get an issue like this. The only other one off the top of my head I can think that's kind of similar to this, there's an issue of New X-Men by Grant Morrison that is almost entirely presented without any dialogue, I think, with the exception of the final page. Yeah, basically people think Spidey is dead, and then something weird happens. Now this is the strangest point in the series. There is this two-part Requiem story. And the first time I read Ultimate Spider-Man, this is where, in terms of mapping it out, it gets a little bit confusing because it's not entirely clear what you'd read after that issue 133 unless you go up and go online and find a guide or something like that. If you do that, you'll know where to go, and you'll read that this two-part story, this Requiem story that exists, and it just kind of bridges a gap. It goes a little bit into people thinking that Spidey is gone. There's a section here where Mary Jane is interviewing Iron Man. But yeah, it just kind of, it reveals that Spider-Man didn't die. That's the gist of it, anyway. But after this, which I'll just flick through these next few pages to get to the next kind of big thing that happens, because if you didn't read this two-part little story, then you jump ahead to the relaunching of the series with new numbering, and everything's just kind of sort of back to normal, and it's weird. So here we've got, as they used it on the hardcover, this is that cover to Ultimate Spider-Man 2009, renumbered at this point to a new issue number 1, but it does continue onwards. However, and we've now got the artwork of David LaFuente, by the way, who I think is the most distinctively different artist. So whereas Immonen took over from Bagley and it wasn't a hugely different style, I think that LaFuente's style is very different. The book almost starts to look a bit like a manga at this point, like a colorized manga. Not a bad thing, I still like it, but it is the artwork that I think is the most divisive out of the main 3 artists who worked on this series. But this is weird because now what's happened is there's basically a time jump 6 months forward from the end of the Ultimatum story where Peter was seemingly dead, and New York is just back to normal. Pristine and looking beautiful, like it wasn't wrecked by a massive tsunami and plunged into literal hell on earth just a few months ago. Everything's okay again. But even more so than that, just other stuff has happened off page, you know, in between these issues that's never really explained, and it's the weakest point of the story in my opinion for that reason. And it ain't terrible, but it's just weird. So, for example, Peter and Mary Jane have broken up. Don't really know why. There's never something that explains exactly why. They're just not together anymore. And also, he's now with Gwen, who we see here, where they're just making out in his room. But that's kind of weird because prior to this, they had said of each other and their relationship that they very much feel like a kind of brother and sister situation, and they don't have any attraction to each other. But then in this jump forward, suddenly Peter's not with MJ anymore, he's with Gwen, and it's just strange. I don't know, it just felt like I'd missed something. I remember specifically feeling like, what did I miss? And even when you read those 2 Requiem issues that do come between that, it still doesn't fully explain all of this. Yeah, so that is something to be aware of. If you do read this and you feel like you've missed something, like, is this omnibus missing something out? It's not. That's just kind of what happened and how it was. But other than that, you know, once you get past that little bit of confusion, or at least it was confusing for me, you get right back into the series and you just kind of go with it, and it's still Ultimate Spider-Man goodness overall. And this is a fun point in the comic. I quite like this because at this stage, if not right now, then certainly very soon, it becomes like a foster home where May, who obviously had Peter living with her and also Gwen, but then she starts looking after Johnny Storm as well. He kind of joins them. He's sort of left the Fantastic Four, and he comes in as another supporting character. But so does Bobby Drake as well, Iceman. He's left the X-Men. Because mutants in general are all now pretty much having to go into hiding because of what happened in Ultimatum. That was triggered by Magneto, and this world that was already very anti-mutant is now even more so. So Bobby Drake's living there as well, and it's just this kind of cast of young characters all sort of bouncing off each other, and yeah, it creates some fun situations. I quite liked it. You know, it feels like a distinctly different era of Spidey. And this is cool. This LaFuente art style is pretty fun. I quite liked it, you know. I saw a lot of criticism of this. I remember when I first read through it, and I was kind of looking up online what other people thought about it, you know, like, well, like I do, I'm sure other people do, when you really like something, it's interesting to hear what others think of it, good or bad. But yeah, a lot of people kind of draw in criticism from this and really not a lot of positivity about it, Lafuente's artwork. But I don't think it's bad at all. In fact, I quite liked it. Let me know, obviously, what you think, your thoughts on any of this stuff. Speaking of hearing from others and what other people think of it, share your thoughts in the comments by all means. Very interested to hear what people think about any of this stuff, any of Ultimate Spider-Man, as something that I like as much as I do. More than happy to talk about it. But yeah, so it's it's just a crazy time. I just really enjoy all this. I mean, eventually, so Kitty is now showing up. There's this mysterious character who's showing up, a new sort of superhero vigilante. At first, no one's quite sure who that is, but it turns out to be Kitty. Following on from what happened in Ultimatum, just to kind of go back a little bit to that bit where Jonah Jameson saw Spidey saving everybody and jumping in the water. He ends up being really cool about that, and it completely changes his opinion on Spider-Man. And then when he learns that Peter is Spider-Man, he basically is really cool about it, and he just says that he sees him as a hero now. He understands what he does. He's not going to reveal his identity to anybody. He'll keep it secret. And not only that, he lets him continue to work at the Bugle, and also basically says, if you ever can't come in because of Spider-Man stuff, that's absolutely fine. So you're under no obligation to come in. There'll never be any ramifications for you not showing up and doing your work. And he'll keep paying him, and he gives him a college tuition and stuff. And yeah, just really great kind of turnaround and arc for Jonah Jameson's character. Something else that was really cool. There's a story here. I think this is the one where there's like a shapeshifter who takes on Peter's form. That's kind of a crazy story. But say something, as I flick through all this again, what I now want to do, I just really want to go through and read the whole thing again. Now I've got the entire thing in omnibus format. Kind of been waiting for that to be the case, because I want to read through all this series again, and a good excuse to do it in my mind is when it's all finally available now in this format. So now I can pick it up with volume 1 and just run through and just relive it all again. Really look forward to it. So all in all, really good to have this volume. It's all good stuff. It might not technically be as good as the stuff in the first 3 volumes, but I mean that stuff is all like unbelievably good. But this is still high quality. It's not such a dip in quality that I'm going to say don't bother with it, stop at volume 3. That's not my opinion whatsoever. I think all of it is worth a read. The stuff in here, going beyond this into the next story, the big event, Death of Spider-Man, and then beyond that too into the Miles Morales stuff, all really strong. Just going through the extras here in the back, obviously. Cool sketches, some variants. A lot of Lafuente artwork here specifically. I think this is an interview with Stuart Immonen from a magazine he obviously did at some point. 2009 interview with Brian Michael Bendis. Yeah, just a really great book. Really pleased to have it. As I said again, let me know what any of your thoughts are on this stuff, Ultimate Spider-Man in general. Really interesting to hear the thoughts of others on this one. But thank you as always for watching this. I do appreciate that as always. If you stuck with me all the way through, thank you very much. I'll be back in soon to discuss something else.